Die ehemalige Kanzlerin Angela Merkel hat in 2 Interviews bestätigt, dass es Deutschland mit den Minsker Abkommen nicht ernst gemeint hatte und Berlin nur Zeit für die Ukraine einkaufen wollte. Was bedeutet das für die Geschichte der Ukrainekrise?
Former Chancellor Angela Merkel confirmed in 2 interviews that Germany was not an honest broker when she signed the Minsk Accords, and that Berlin just wanted to buy time for Ukraine. What does it mean for the history of the current Ukraine crisis?
Well, it means that the Russians have been confirmed as being the only party that was serious about a diplomatic solution to the issue of the Donbass crisis. As Russian President Vladimir Putin has astutely noted, Russia was winning the conflict, prevailing in the conflict in 2014 when Angela Merkel begged him to come to the negotiating table. He did so because he respected her. He respected Germany. He respected German diplomacy. He respected Germany's honor, their integrity. And he was let down because there was no honor and integrity in Angela Merkel. There was no honor and integrity in Germany. She lied. Germany lied. This is a stain on Germany. This is a stain on Europe. And today, when people talk about Russia's unprovoked war of aggression in Ukraine, reflect on Angela Merkel and the lies she told, buying time, a ceasefire that basically was designed to allow Ukraine an opportunity to build a military capable of conducting offensive operations against Russia in the Donbass. Merkel wasn't looking for peace. She was looking for war, and she got it. Ukraine got it. Europe got it. This is Germany's war. This is Merkel's war. You're responsible for the death and destruction that's taking place in Ukraine today. Only you, only Germany. And now what? Scholz wants Russia to negotiate? Why would Russia ever negotiate with Germany again? Why? What does Germany bring to the table? Lies, deceit, war. The same with France. The same with the United States. The West is not a reliable negotiating partner. No, this is a war whose conclusion will be dictated by the victor. And the victor is going to be Russia. The loser, of course, is the Ukrainian people, but the loser is also Europe. Europe is going to suffer because of this, not because Russia is going to invade, but because Europe is going to pay a price economically and diplomatically. Who will ever trust Europe again? Who would ever want to trust Europe again? Now, Angela Merkel should go down in history as one of the most despicable figures. She had an opportunity to have a legacy of constructive, achievements, but she will go down in history as a liar, a cheat, someone who put war ahead of peace. She's a warmonger. She's a war criminal. And so is Germany by extension.
Merkels nationaler Sicherheitsberater und spätere UN-Botschafter Christoph Heusgen bestätigte diese Version in einem Interview und bezeichnete es gar als diplomatische Meisterleistung. Was bedeutet das für Deutschland und die Diplomatie im Allgemeinen?
Merkel's national security advisor and subsequent ambassador to the United Nations, Christoph Heusgen, confirmed the betrayal of Russia with the Minsk agreements in an interview and called it even a diplomatic masterpiece. What does it mean for Germany and diplomacy in general?
Well, it shows the utter lack of moral fiber, moral character on the part of Germany, the United States, and Europe. Diplomacy, of course, is the art of getting the other side to do that which you want them to do. Let's not pretend that diplomacy is about, noble sacrifice. Diplomacy is about looking out for the interest of your country. But for diplomacy to work, to be viable, there has to be honor, there has to be integrity attached to it. There are rules that when you sit down and you negotiate and you put the proceedings in writing and signatures are assigned to it, stamps are put in. When you go to the United Nations Security Council and secure a resolution that backs up this document, that you are saying this is real, this is genuine, this is what we want, this is what we're striving to achieve. No longer. Germany's word is useless, worthless. Spit on it. A signature, what does that mean? It stands for nothing because Germany stands for nothing. A masterpiece of diplomacy, a masterpiece of deceit. You know what? Diplomacy is supposed to be about how to talk your way out of a war, how to let people dock, so people to go bang, bang, bang. Masterpiece, you just guarantee that nobody will ever sit down and negotiate a peaceful resolution. But the only solution is war. The only solution is to bring to bear superior firepower and crush your enemy. That the only way out of a conflict is to dictate the terms of conflict termination after you destroy hostile forces on the battlefield. Hey, good job, masterpiece of diplomacy. And it's an embarrassment, and it'll be judged by history as such.
Denken Sie, dass es irgendwelche Konsequenzen bei der UN nach sich ziehen wird, wenn ein UN-Botschafter einen solchen Verrat als diplomatische Meisterleistung bezeichnet?
Do you think there will be any consequences from the side of the UN if a UN ambassador calls such a thing a masterpiece of diplomacy?
The UN is a disgraced organization, literally a disgraced organization. It either has to reform itself and return to the principles set forth in its charter, or it has to disband. The UN, the United States views the UN as a vehicle that extends American diplomatic reach, American national security and foreign policy objectives, instead of what it's supposed to be, a forum for international discourse towards the peaceful resolution of conflicts. If the United Nations is certifying the deception of Angela Merkel and the Minsk Accords as a masterpiece of diplomacy, it means that the United States, like Germany, or the United Nations, like Germany, stands for nothing.
Deutschland möchte Polen mit Patriot-Luftabwehrsystemen unterstützen. Warum ist Russland so besorgt darüber?
Germany wants to support Poland with Patriot air defense systems. Why is Russia so concerned about it?
Well, I mean, because it's an escalation. If you put Patriot missile batteries on the ground in Poland, the radar of these the radar coverage of these missile batteries extends into Ukraine, and so does the range of the missiles, which means now NATO is basically projecting military capability into Ukraine, and this could lead to potential harsh consequences. What if a Russian aircraft is flying along the Ukrainian-Polish border and it is painted by this German radar? Are the Russians supposed to view this as a peaceful act or a hostile act? And if it's a hostile act, Russia has a right to peremptory self-defense, to fire a missile to take out that radar. And now we have a war between NATO and Russia. There's no reason for this air defense system to be deployed in Poland. None whatsoever. Russia doesn't pose a threat to Poland. Russia doesn't pose a threat to NATO. By projecting this power forward into Poland, however, NATO is going to pose a threat to Russia. I think Russia will give a stern warning that it will treat any designation of its aircraft by NATO radars in Poland as a hostile act. And then we'll see what the future holds. This is going to become even more complicated if the United States follows through on its promise to deploy Patriot air defense systems into Ukraine under Ukrainian control. What distinguishes a German radar in Poland from a Ukrainian radar in Ukraine targeting an aircraft? Are the two going to be talking to one another? Is there going to be coordination? Very complicated, very dangerous situation. There's absolutely a threat of an extended conflict. And again, the threat emanates from the behavior of NATO, not the behavior of Russia. Russia has said that its actions will be limited to Ukraine. If NATO wants to supply Ukraine, it's unfortunate for the Ukrainian people because it just furthers the suffering that they will have to undergo until Russia's ultimate victory. That's prerogative of NATO and Ukraine. But NATO seems to be seeking every opportunity to escalate this conflict, to turn it into a military-on-military confrontation. I think in some sort of forlorn hope that Russia will somehow be intimidated by this and back down. Russia won't be intimidated. I believe Russia is going to continue this operation until all of its objectives in Ukraine are accomplished. And the question is, what is NATO going to do while that happens?
Olaf Scholz sagte im Bundestag, dass Russland bzw. Wladimir Putin kein einziges Ziel in der Ukraine erreicht habe. Stimmen Sie dem zu?
Olaf Scholz said in the Bundestag that Russia, or better said Vladimir Putin, hasn't achieved any of its goals in Ukraine. Would you confirm that?
No. Hey, Schultz, what a joke. I don't know, Schultz. All I can say is watch this space. The Russians have destroyed the NATO army that NATO has built in Ukraine. Hey, Schultz, if you're so confident in victory, why aren't you giving the Ukrainians tanks? Come on, big guy. Saddle up. Put the tanks on the ground. How about armored fighting vehicles? Give them to them. Give them modern German. Why don't you just empty the German arsenal and give it to the Ukrainians to finalize the defeat of Vladimir Putin? Why? Oh, because everything will be destroyed, just like everything that has been provided to the Ukrainian army has been destroyed. Russia has destroyed not only the Ukrainian army, but NATO. NATO has been destroyed on the ground in Ukraine. Every time NATO provides equipment to Ukraine, it gets destroyed. Sadly, Ukrainian soldiers die in the process, but Germany doesn't really seem to care about that. Russia has behaved in a very measured manner. I think that the tolerance and the slow approach of Russia is about to end. And I'd like to see what Scholz has to say in a month or two when Bakhmut has fallen, when the Ukrainian defenses are rolled up, when Russian tanks are on the move. Putin is defeating you, Scholz. I would say this: Scholz has accomplished nothing he set out to do in this. How about sanctions, Scholz? How's that worked out? Really? Russia's economy doing badly? No, your economy is tanking because of sanctions. How about your great American friend? They're selling you liquid natural gas at reasonable price. No, they're charging you through the nose. Your energy prices are going up. Hey, German people, how does it feel to be on the winning side? Oh, you're not winning, are you? You're losing. I mean, come on, Scholz lives in a fantasy world. Vladimir Putin is playing the long game. Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation is going to win the conflict in Ukraine. And in doing so, they're going to oversee the demise of Germany as a modern economic state and the European Union, which may not exist when this is all said and done. So I think Scholz is living in a fantasy world.
Sie haben Bachmut erwähnt. Warum ist Bachmut so wichtig?
You mentioned Bakhmut. Why is Bakhmut so important?
Well, Bakhmut has been the nerve center of the Ukrainian defensive line in the Donetsk region. It is heavily defended. I don't think the Ukrainians ever thought it could fall, and yet the Russians are on the verge of completing the defeat of Ukrainian forces in Bakhmut. And when that falls, not only does it open the door for Russian advance deeper into Donetsk and further, but Russians will be able to roll up the Ukrainian defenses. Ukraine has poured in its strategic reserves into Bakhmut in a vain effort to hold on. The Russians are calling it the meat grinder for a reason. Ukrainian forces that are put in are being ground up. Casualty figures are just mind-boggling high for the Ukrainians. It's a death trap. And I think Ukraine knows that when Bakhmut falls, and it will fall, that this will change the entire dynamic on the battlefield to the detriment of Ukraine.
Die westliche Seite ist der Meinung, dass die Ukraine Bachmut sehr gut verteidigt, während die pro-russische Seite sich fragt, warum es so lange dauert. Wie stehen Sie dazu?
The pro-Western side claims that Ukraine defends Bakhmut very well, while the pro-Russians are asking themselves why it takes so long for the Russian army to win this battle. What's your stake here?
Well, first of all, the Russians that are asking that probably don't know anything about war. I mean, the Russian forces are literally assaulting one of the most heavily defended spots on the planet, and they're doing a good job. The Ukrainian side, I don't know. I think the Germans thought that they were doing a good job of operating in Stalingrad up until the end. The bottom line is, military math. How many people is Ukraine losing? The amount of resources that are being burned up in Bakhmut by Ukraine far exceed their ability to replenish. So just from a pure military mathematical standpoint, no one can say that Ukraine is prevailing. They're burning up their resources at a rate far greater than they can replenish it, as opposed to the Russians, who are replenishing greatly, having reserves pulling in while minimizing the amount of casualties they suffer. They're losing 8 to 10 Ukrainians for every Russian lost. So let's say that's 500 Ukrainians in a day. The Russians are losing 50 guys. That's a lot of guys, but it ain't 500. That's a casualty ratio that Russia can sustain indefinitely. So anybody who thinks that Ukraine is winning simply is deluding themselves. And any Russian that doubts the military prowess, hey, why don't you go to the front line and see how it is? People sitting in the back, like me, in a chair thousands of miles removed. We have to be careful when we start criticizing the actions of those on the front lines. This is hard fighting, really hard fighting. And the Russians and the Ukrainians are, both putting it all on the line. It's just that Russia's doing it better than Ukraine and Russia's prevailing.
Sollte Bachmut fallen, ist der Weg dann frei für eine diplomatische Lösung oder wird es dann noch schwieriger?
If Bakhmut falls, will this be a better chance for a diplomatic resolution of this war, or will it be just harder to get to this point?
Well, maybe if Angela Merkel wasn't a liar, there could have been a diplomat. Maybe if the Russians thought the Germans were serious about diplomacy, that Europe was serious about diplomacy, that Russia might be willing to seek a diplomatic resolution. But, Russia's already been burned. They were winning in 2014. People need to go back and study the history that led up to the Minsk Accords, with the Russian military surrounding the Ukrainian forces in several towns in Donetsk, and the Ukrainians begging Europe to do something. So Angela Merkel intervened, got the ceasefire. Vladimir Putin now says that was a huge mistake. We should have finished the job. We should have finished off the Ukrainians. We should never have trusted Europe. So there will never be a diplomatic solution. Thank you, Angela Merkel. You've just condemned tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Ukrainian troops to death because there won't be a diplomatic solution. Russia is going to fight this to the bitter end. Russia is going to destroy Ukraine, dictate the terms of conflict termination. Why? Because Germany has taken the diplomatic part off the table. And every German needs to reflect on that right now. The only way to restore your dignity is for your current Chancellor, Scholz, to do the right thing and back out of this conflict and acknowledge that this was a big mistake, that NATO needs to disengage, that Ukraine needs to stop fighting, that Ukraine needs to find a way to accept Russian terms, so to preserve what's left of Ukrainian territorial integrity and as many Ukrainian lives as possible. But no, that's not what Scholz is going to do, because he's a hero, you see. He's willing to fight to the last Ukrainian. He's willing to sit there and promote a conflict that his predecessor created. This is a German war. Germany made this war possible. Germany is responsible for this war. There will be no diplomatic solution because of Germany.